be doing. Okay? He should be saying, look, obviously we have a lot of money, this country. You know, it's true that when we want to spend money for education and jobs and so on, they say, oh, we don't have the money. But when it comes to bailing out the banks and financial institutions, we have $1 trillion for that. We have the money, we're rich. We're not going to give any of it, not a dollar, to these financial institutions. We're going to take this money, we're going to give it directly to the people who need it. It's called, the anarchists call this direct action. Obama's not exactly an anarchist, but it's a nice principle, actually. You don't go through middle people and middle people and middle people until nothing happens at the end. People need jobs. You give them jobs. You don't give money to corporations hoping the corporations will give people jobs. Because you believe in the market. You believe that the market doesn't work that way. The market only works for profit, not for human beings, you see. So you have to, give jobs directly. The New Deal, and here's where the historical analogy is useful. The New Deal gave jobs to 8 million people. It put people to work. And yes, what they talk about in sort of timorous terms, big governments, as if we not always have big government. We always have big government for the rich. When you start doing something for everybody else, they say, oh, wow, big government. No, the government must give jobs directly to people who need it. Anybody who's unemployed wants to work, the government will employ you. During the 1930s, the government employed young people to all over the country. They built bridges, they repaired highways, they built playgrounds and swimming pools. The government hired artists and writers and musicians. The federal arts program, never been anything like it. We need another federal arts program. The first play I ever saw, I was a teenager, I guess. I actually was once a teenager. And the first play I ever saw was a WPA play. I think I paid 17 cents to get in. That's the way the WPA worked. They put on plays all over the country to people who had never seen a play in their lives, and socially conscious plays. And it was a wonderful, wonderful program. So the government needs to give money directly to people, give them jobs, give the people who are having their homes foreclosed. Don't give money to the banks and say, treat these people nicely who can't pay their mortgages. No. Don't allow anybody to lose their homes. Don't do whatever is necessary. We'll call a moratorium. This is one of the things happening. A moratorium on foreclosures. Nobody can be foreclosed out of their homes. Help people pay their mortgages. Direct government aid. Have a government program of health care. Obama has taken a step in that direction, but only a small step. And he's resisted what is obviously needed and what other countries have very successfully, and what even we have successfully in the form of Medicare and Social Security, a government-run program bypassing the insurance companies. We need a government-run program, free health care for everybody. And, so there are things we can learn from the New Deal and from the 30s.
Yeah, I'm Howard Zinn, and I approve of this message. I want to run for office. No, but you mentioned the 1930s and what existed in terms of social programs. You've written extensively about the movements and the struggle that it took to win those things. 3 general strikes in 1934 that shut down 3 different cities, the sit-down strikes that defined the United Auto Workers, the creation of the CIO, the Great Industrial Union. And I wanted to ask you, when was the first time you were aware that there was such a thing as a labor movement, that there was such a thing as labor radicalism, and that it was something that you wanted to both identify with and elucidate for the public?
The first time, I think I was 3 years old. I don't know. I think the first time I became aware of labor movement and unions and so on was when at the age of 18 I went to work in a shipyard, the Brooklyn Navy Yard actually, and I grew up in a working class family, and in my family and other families around us, my neighborhood, kids did not go to college at the age of 18. And they went to work, and I went to work at the age of 18. And I went to work in the shipyard, and I discovered that there were unions in the shipyard, but I was not allowed to join the union. I also noticed that there were black workers in the shipyard who were not allowed to join the union. And because the unions that existed at that time in the shipyard were the old AFL unions, which were craft unions. In other words, the ship fitters were in one union, the shipwrights were in another union, the pipe fitters were another union, the joiners were another union, all these people in separate unions, and all exclusive, leaving out unskilled workers like me, like the young workers in the shipyard, like the blacks who did the heaviest work, working the riveting machines and the shipping machines. And then I became aware that the CIO was coming up and growing, that the CIO had a totally different point of view. The CIO had the same point of view that the IWW had back in the early part of the 20th century. And that is, you don't separate workers and you don't keep people out of the unions because they're unskilled or they're foreign born or they're women no, everybody, one big union. The CIO was doing that. And the result was an upsurge of labor power in the 1930s. And it was a wonderful thing to see. And it was that, and you pointed out, that's what propelled the New Deal reforms. It wasn't that Roosevelt suddenly decided, oh, this would be a nice thing to do for people. Mm-hmm. Presidents don't make decisions like, oh, this is a nice thing to do for people. No, presidents only do nice things for people. I hate to say this, but it's true. Almost everything I say is true. Presidents do not do things just because they have it in their hearts. Mm-hmm. No, they do things because they're politicians and they see what's happening in the country, and if there's turmoil in the country and there's a kind of threat to the system, then they react. Just as, I was working in the South, teaching in the South, and those of us who were in the Southern movement could see Kennedy, Johnson, liberal Democrats, they were not going to do anything against racial segregation until blacks went out into the streets and created a big commotion in the nation. And that's what happened in the 1930s with Roosevelt.
Yeah, and I'd love to just continue pulling that thread on the sweater here. Because of your involvement in the Southern movement and in the African American freedom struggle, when was the first time you were aware that there was such a thing as a civil rights movement? And it was something that you wanted to learn more about and elucidate for a general public?
Well, I guess, I learned about the existence of the movement as it was developing. I came down to Atlanta, Georgia to teach at Spelman College in 1956. And I was 1 year after the Montgomery bus boycott, of which I was aware, like other Americans were aware of the Montgomery bus boycott. But now it was 1956. Things seemed quiet. And it's interesting about things seeming quiet, and it's a very important thing to understand. Never assume that because things seem quiet, that people aren't thinking, or that people aren't feeling, or that people aren't capable of speaking out and acting, because the social change happens first under the surface. It happens first in the minds and hearts of people, and you don't see it, and so you think, oh, nothing is happening. But no, my students were feeling racial segregation, even if they weren't doing anything about it. And so I became aware as I was talking to my students and realizing, oh, well, sure, things seem quieter on here. But there was enormous indignation in my students, and I wonder when it's going to burst out, and burst out. And, well, actually, even before the sit-ins, we began to do things in Atlanta. My students began to do things in Atlanta, little forays against racial segregation, desegregating the Atlanta Public Library, going to the state legislature and sitting in the wrong part of the gallery and so on. But then came the sit-ins in February '60, and everybody, very often it's all under the surface, and then somebody makes a move, somebody does something, and that sets things off. So anytime, think about doing something. Think about doing something that it might set something off, it might not for the first 20 times, but keep doing it. And 21st